YouTube, how far art thou, YouTube? Welcome to my sundial. And as you can see, the sundial says that it's nearly 11:30. And as you can see, the clock says that it's 16 minutes past. So there's 12 minutes difference between the sundial and the clock. The clock, of course, is telling Eastern Standard Time. And the centre of the time zone is 100 miles to the west of where I'm sitting. I'm 30 degrees latitude away from the equator, so 1 minute in time should be 10 miles across the landscape. So that explains 10 minutes of the sundial's advance over the clock. The other 2 minutes is down to what they call the equation of time, which is a variation in the speed of the sun across the sky caused by the 23.5 degree axial tilt versus the obliquity of the ecliptic, because the Earth does not orbit the sun in a perfect circle but in an ellipse, and we're not even centered properly. So here's a graphic representation of the equation of time, such that local mean time is the dark horizontal line across the middle of the graph. The 14th of April, the 14th of July, the 2nd of September and the 25th of December are the only days that the sundial and the chronometer are going to agree with each other as to what time midday is. Second week in February, sundial's going to be 14 minutes slow. Middle of May, 3.5 minutes fast. Third week in July, 6 minutes slow. End of October, 1st of November, 16 minutes fast. So, a bit over 1/4 of an hour fast, almost 1/4 of an hour slow, and 15 minutes is 1% of a day. So if you try and live according to local mean time with your chronometer set, you'll be, on average, 7.5 minutes or 0.5% desynchronized. And you will resynchronize 4 times a year. Now, desynchronized from what? From local apparent time. Local apparent time is derived by where the sun appears to be in the sky overhead. It is the passage of reality across the surface of planet Earth. And human beings are animals which have evolved or were designed, depending on your religious philosophy, to live here. So we've been here for hundreds of millions of years, and we are constructed to live under the ebb and flow of the equation of time. That's what natural is. We're fairly complicated entities, biological entities, and a biological entity, biological system, is not quite as rigid as a mechanical system. So being 0.5% out of synchronization is not immediately obviously catastrophic, but being out of touch with reality or out of synchronization with reality, being out of touch with reality is what the textbook calls psychotic, right? So once upon a time the people decided that they would like to live their life according to the town clock instead of the town sundial, because it was more convenient and because the town clock could be observed on cloudy days and every night of the month, not just on the 7 nights before and 7 nights after full moon, because on the full moon at midnight the sundial's perfectly accurate by moonlight, and it's progressively 48 minutes earlier every midnight for 7 nights before full moon, and progressively late for 48 minutes every night after full moon. And there's a theory that moonlight might be the most important sight to bright your dial, because if you remove artificial light from the equation, human females ovulate when the moon is full. And if they copulate when they're ovulating, then they get pregnant, and it takes 9 months to build a baby, so the midwife's going to be able to see by moonlight to walk between the campfires to deliver the babies, and somebody's going to be awake in the wee small hours to notice the sun rising under a different constellation for each one of the 12 crops of human babies that there used to be every year before the deficit financed double-entry bookkeeping accountants decided to burn the midnight oil and desynchronise their womenfolk. But that was, 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. During the day, everybody continued to live their lives according to local apparent time until sort of late 1700s, I guess. Captain Cook was testing chronometers, and that's pretty much the time when people started to think about burning coal to boil water, to make steam and do clever things with the steam. Initially they were pumping water out of coal mines so they could go deeper underground and get a better quality coal to get a higher price on the market, because it's the economy, stupid. But then they found that the higher quality coal meant they could build more powerful steam engines and construct railway trains to drag themselves across the landscape much faster than muscle-powered coaches could ever achieve. So fast that on the east-west axes of their railways, the drivers were starting to run up each other's backsides because they'd started off from different towns with different local mean times, and therefore their schedules weren't functional. So to make the trains run on time, they didn't elect Mussolini or Adolf Hitler. Oh no, they instituted standard time zones. And that's where you get a chronometer and you set it on the 14th of April or one of those other 3 days a year at midday in the centre of a strip of land that's 600 miles across on the east-west axis, 15 degrees around the circumference of planet Earth, because not everybody lives 30 degrees away from the equator like I do. And you set this clock, and everybody who lives in the 1 hour wide strip of time has to live their life according to what the clock says the sun is not doing at the centre of the time zone. So on top of the geotemporal dislocation factor of 7 minutes, or half a percent, which local mean time was imposing on everybody, this will add anything up to 2%. So you'll get an average of that, which is 1.1% geotemporal dislocation. It's maybe 1.15. And that's a lot, really. I mean, if you consider constructing something as simple as a gearbox with just 2 wheels and 100 teeth per wheel and both the same diameter, and you've got the strongest bearings and you've made the gears out of the best possible steel alloy and cut the gears perfectly and case harden them and put them on these strong shafts with beautiful bearings and a really solid gearbox, connect the 2 shafts to a pair of very powerful differential turning mechanisms so that one shaft is going to be turned 360 degrees in a 24-hour day and the other shaft is going to be turned 363.6 degrees in a 24-hour day, and the gears will initially begin to turn and they'll look as if they're meshing, but after 6 or 12 hours the whole structure will be straining and trembling and maybe giving off groaning noises as the torsional stresses accumulate in the shaft from the mismatch, the desynchronization. And before 24 hours are out, the thing will have either snapped the teeth off the gear wheels or broken the gear wheels or shattered the shafts, because a 1% desynchronization in any precise system is ultimately catastrophic. So the civilization that chose to live 1% disconnected from reality so that their trains could run on time, they gave up on external combustion engines and they moved to internal combustion engines. So steam engines weren't good enough for them, they went for petrol engines essentially. And along the way, the Petro-Chemical electrified industrial revolution gave them such wonderful boons to civilization as smokeless explosives, so they could have breech loading quick firing rifles, gas operated machine guns, quick firing artillery, cars and trucks and tanks and aeroplanes, airships, aerial bombs, poison gas, steam turbine powered battleships with compressed air torpedoes, and barbed wire by the industrial trainload. So these people were having themselves a wonderful little mechanised war in Europe. And the English and the Germans and the French all come to the same conclusion, that war has become an industrial activity which is decided by how much resources you can throw at the project. And they didn't want to throw too much resources at the project of lighting civilian homes, particularly not in summer when, due to latitude and twilight issues, they figured if they could get people out of bed at sunrise, working really hard all day, they'd be too tired to sit up reading at night, and they'd go to sleep as soon as it got dark, and then you wouldn't have to burn coal to run a generator to give them the light that they're not sitting up reading by. And they called that daylight saving. And whereas a standard time zone system had everybody living on average 1.1% psychotic, the daylight saving time system gets the clock at the centre of the standard time zone and shifts it 1 hour to spinward, to east, up sun. So, behold, that adds another 4.16% to the geotemporal dislocation factor of the 1.1% that was already there. So you're very close to 5.25% geotemporally dislocated or psychotic once you move to daylight saving time. And it's perhaps not surprising that the society that was 5.25% psychotic in summer and 1.1% psychotic in winter, they were the ones who thought it was clever to have all the men living in muddy holes in the ground behind barbed wire, breathing poison gas, shooting machine guns at each other and throwing explosives, right? In the war to end all wars. Happy Anzac Day. But they paid their physicists to daydream about nuclear fission so that they could have more energy released faster and thus create a bigger bang next time. And next time, in the Second World War, 20 odd years down the track, both England and Germany fought the Battle of Britain on what they call double summer time, where you move the clock in the centre of the time zone 2 hours up to the spinward. So they were living 1,200 miles out of synchronization with what the flow of time was doing around them. And that gets you 8 to 10% geotemporally disconnected. So if being 0.5% or 1% is not going to strip the teeth off the gears in your mind, what do you think 8 or 10% is going to do? How insane was the stuff that went on in the Second World War? I seem to recall reading about the Germans trying to industrially exterminate the gypsies, the Jews, the criminals, the political dissidents, the insane and the disabled, and they attacked the United Soviet Socialist Republics. And they tried to occupy Moscow, and that was the end of the 10,000-year Pan-German Reich that Adolf was trying to set up. And the British, meanwhile, invented aerially delivered firestorms where you cruise hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bombers dropping, 4 or 5 tons of bombs per aeroplane onto a medieval wooden industrial city full of civilians. And you light such a big fire that you change the local weather pattern. When they did this at Hamburg in 1943, they cooked 40,000 people in a night, and they did it 4 nights in a row, but they didn't get as many on subsequent nights because there's so many not being there after the first night. At Dresden, the reactionary revisionist apologist historians are saying there was only 25,000 killed in one night, but at the time the story was there was up to 132,000 killed at Dresden. But it's still a pretty insane way to behave. But the most geotemporally disconnected act of all World War II was conducted by the Imperial Japanese Empire, who lived their whole life on flat Earth Tokyo time because they didn't admit they were living on the skin of an oblate spheroid. So they began by attacking Pearl Harbor, one of the smaller industrialist nations in the world, not particularly well advanced past the feudal state, attacking the biggest, most industrialised country on the planet, and that finished the Imperial Japanese Empire. And in the meantime, before they went down, they had Imperial Japanese Marines on Guam, and they were getting up to greet the dawn at 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, local apparent time, because that's when it was sunrise in Tokyo. Simultaneously, in Burma, the Japanese army were getting up at 3 o'clock local apparent time so they could raise their flags and wave their swords and blow their bugles and greet the dawn, Tokyo time. Geotemporal dislocation, driven by living a clockwise life. It causes otherwise sane, normal, rational, reasonable people to do absolutely ridiculous, insane bullshit for reasons that make no sense, but it's traditional to obey the social mores and norms, so everybody goes ahead and does it anyway. It's a bit sad, but you know, here I sit on the outside edge of a society which spends half its year deliberately being 1.15% psychotic and the rest of the year being 5.25% psychotic. So the average is about 6.4% divided by 2, which gives us 3.2% geotemporal dislocation factor on average across New South Wales. 3.2%. Now, how much psychosis is there in this modern world that everybody agrees is pretty mad and crazy? Around here, they reckon 1% schizophrenic, 1% manic depressive psychotic or bipolar disorder, and that leaves us with 1.2% for the catatonics, the drug-induced psychotics, the sociopaths and the corporate psychopaths. I don't think we have much difficulty at all in showing that the average rate of psychosis in society in New South Wales in 2013 is roughly equivalent to the average geotemporal dislocation factor brought on by observing artificially calculated plastic time that is disconnected from local apparent time, which is the natural way to measure the flow of time across the surface of planet Earth. And that's where we live. It's where we're evolved to live, or designed or constructed. We live 93 million miles away from the sun, which we are orbiting, and the sun generates the light which drives the sundial by photons coming from a continuous hydrogen fusion reaction that is generated by the heat and the pressure caused by the gravity. And nobody really knows why gravity is so. We just know what it does, and it behaves like the only perpetual motion machine in the universe. That's what gravity is. So my advice, subscribers and casual viewers, is that you go to a library or a bookstore and purchase, beg, buy, borrow, steal, photocopy a book on sundials, their theory and construction, determine your latitude, and build yourself a sundial. Start to measure the local apparent time, and as you walk past it every sunny day or moonlit night, you will experience the pleasurable frisson, the thrill of knowing that you are not one of the plastic clockwise blind lemmings looking for a faster track to jump off the cliff. You can have that much satisfaction. You can look around you at a society that is directly descended from the people who kicked off the steam-powered and then petro-powered industrial revolution when they decided to live clockwise instead of dial-wise. And clockwise lies madness. Madness lies clockwise. The more clockwise your life becomes, the less connected you are with the flow of reality across planet Earth. The less connected you are with reality, the more psychotic you become. It's as if we live on the passenger quarters of an intergenerational starship with the engine room safely set at a tamper-proof distance. But a bit over 5,000 years ago, some of the crew went insane and they decided they wanted to chop down the air recyclers and dig up the water and food recyclers and burn the chopped down air recyclers to smelt the dug up food and water recyclers so they could manufacture jewellery and sell it to each other and call each other rich by having an economy. And therefore now we've got a different gas mix in the atmosphere, and the heat chemistry equations have all changed, and therefore thus and because the backup mechanisms have kicked in to try and sterilise the plague of extravagant humans. And thus and because Gaia effect, or Gaia's revenge, appears to be systematically using extreme weather events to deconstruct the industrial infrastructure which is necessary to conduct the economic society which is emitting the carbon. So, if you want to live in the real world, observe local apparent time. Ciao.